Good evening. It's the Daily Office Digest for this Wednesday. We have Isaiah 52 and Ephesians 5. Isaiah 52 we've covered before. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion, put on thy beautiful garments of Jerusalem, the holy city. Right, this beautiful exaltation that salvation has come. Cleansing, being in the covenant, truly being marked for the covenant. No more crying and mourning and dwelling in sin and captivity, but rather you hear the good news of salvation, right? That brings good tidings, publishing salvation. And the big point of that is God reigns. He reigns. Go sing that Newsboys song. Man, that brings me back. Not always in a good way. But anyhow, God, the watchman shall lift up his voice, those that have been vigilant, right? Um, Bringing to Zion, breaking forth in joy, rejoicing because of God's redemption and comforting of his people, by the strength of his power, by his holy arm, right? When he bears his holy arm, that's when he does something very public and the nations see it. And it's interesting how that kind of culminates in the cross and the resurrection and still goes on. Those signs, those workings that God did publicly in the sight of men, um, still reverberate throughout history and throughout the world, so that all nations can see the salvation of our God, and then that also enters our hearts and lives too and makes a difference. And again, that's a sign from God reverberating out from the resurrection. Um, and so it's to go out to meet the King, bearing the vessels of the Lord, this kind of priestly job, go out and worship him. Not with haste or by flight, like you're running away from something. Interesting, contrasting that with the Passover. But rather that God's going to go before you and your rearward, right? Protecting you, He's guiding you and protecting your rear guard, being your rear guard, and you go in safety and peace and into God's rest. And that's a good thing. And again, all these things are realized and fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Ephesians, we continue on the more practical side, right, of the practical half of Ephesians, of now let's be followers of God as dear children, right? So children of God walking in love, just as Christ loved us, right? Following that greatest of the commandments, the two greatest commandments, right? Love God and love neighbor. Hard to do, right? But still, God gives us the grace to do that. And then in his loving, he offers himself up as a sacrifice and an offering to God, a sweet smelling savor, pointing to especially, the smell of the sacrifice itself, like the burnt offerings, but also there were the incense offerings as well, which points particularly to prayer. But I think this is all around just sacrifices and offerings that we saw in the temple. And we do that by being faithful to God, particularly with not just our souls, but our bodies. And that's what comes up next, right? No fornication, uncleanness, covetousness. Because you're saints, you're holy, you're set apart to God, right? You're holy, sanctified for his purposes and use. So, and now not just your actions, but also filthiness, foolish talking, jesting, right? Your mouth, what comes out of your mouth defiles the man. But instead of using your tongue for that, use it for the giving of thanks. And then we see who inherits the kingdom, not whoremongers, unclean persons, or covetous men, or idolaters, right? Interesting. Is it all three of those are idolaters? Yes, likely, but also covetousness ties tightly to idolatry, right? It's kind of like the very beginning and very end of the Ten Commandments. But there are those who want to challenge that concept or idea or undermine that, and they will deceive us with vain words. So we need to be watch out for that. And because of such insolence, wrath of God comes upon the children of disobedience. So don't be hanging out with them. Don't be partakers with them. Don't be in fellowship with them. Don't run with them. That's practical, right? It's tempting to do that sometimes. It's especially in your youth. You feel very cool doing that sort of thing. But then it can happen later in life too. Some feeling dangerous or exciting or cool or glamorous. Um, Here's sometimes darkness, but now our light in the Lord walk as children of light. So now we have a contrast of darkness and light, which points back to the wider emphasis of Ephesians and looking to the fruit of the Spirit, which is acceptable to God, not with work. Uh, don't produce works of dark, fruitful works of darkness, right? The bad fruit, um, which is again often done by those in secret. And is that point to Christians hiding sin, or is it rather to mystery cults, or just the Gentile stuff where a lot of wicked things are kind of shrouded in the dark corners of society? Could be that too. Um, but all things that are reproved are made manifest by the light. So that which is again, that which is evil and wrong is going to be shown forth. And actually, we get a role in shining forth the light of the gospel and righteousness and wake up, right? We get to help, like the sunlight wakes up people or a lamp or something. We get to wake up and wake people up from their spiritual death and stupor, and the light we're shining is the light of Christ. Um, anyway, that's a lot, and that's actually a wonderful duty and responsibility we have, and something we can really rejoice in. And that's something we're still called to do, to let the light of Christ shine. So um, I'll leave us at that, but that's a good way to finish our evening, and I will see you all tomorrow, Lord willing.